The transport ship Horizon docked at Nexus Prime with a soft thud that echoed through the metal corridors. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the viewport, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. The station looked like a giant metal city floating in space with thousands of lights twinkling from its many levels. "First time seeing something this big?" asked Dr. Lisa Park as she joined him at the window. She carried a tablet filled with notes about the different alien species they would meet. "Not the biggest station I've seen, but definitely the busiest," Jake replied. He could see ships of all shapes and sizes docked at various ports. Some looked like Earth vessels, but others had designs he had never imagined. Lieutenant Sam Carter walked up behind them, checking his sidearm one more time. "Security briefing. Says we should expect at least 40 different species at this summit. Some friendly, some not so much." Jake nodded. This was humanity's first official invitation to the Galactic Trade Summit. 3 years ago, Earth had made contact with other intelligent life. Now they were finally being invited to the big table. It was a chance to prove that humans belonged among the stars. The airlock opened with a hiss, and the 3 humans stepped onto Nexus Prime. The first thing that hit them was the smell. It was not bad, just different. Like metal and ozone mixed with something floral. The second thing was the noise. Hundreds of conversations in dozens of languages filled the air. Jake looked around the docking bay. Creatures of all sizes and shapes moved about their business. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others had 4 or 6. One group near the far wall seemed to float rather than walk. Their skin was blue and seemed to shimmer in the station's lights. "Stay close," Jake said to his team. "Let's find the registration area." They followed signs written in multiple languages until they reached a large desk staffed by a creature with 4 arms and green skin. Its eyes were large and black, taking up most of its face. "Species and purpose of visit?" the creature asked in perfect English. "Human." "We're here for the trade summit," Jake replied. The creature's 4 hands moved quickly across different control panels. "Ah yes, the new species. You have been assigned quarters in Section C. Please note that weapons are not permitted in common areas." Jake unbuckled his sidearm and placed it in the designated locker. Sam did the same, though he looked unhappy about it. Lisa had no weapons to store. "Your credentials," the creature continued, handing them each a small device. "These will translate most languages and provide station maps. Welcome to Nexus Prime." They made their way through the station's main corridors. The place was huge. Jake estimated it could hold over 1 million beings. The walls were covered with shops, restaurants, and meeting rooms. Digital displays showed arrival and departure times for ships, trade goods prices, and news from across the galaxy. "Look at that," Lisa whispered, pointing to a group of tall, thin creatures with silver skin. "Their bone structure suggests they evolved in low gravity." "Save the science talk for later," Sam muttered. "Right now I'm more worried about who might be watching us." Jake understood Sam's concern. Being the new species made them objects of curiosity. He could feel eyes on them as they walked. Some looks seemed friendly, others seemed suspicious, and a few seemed almost hungry. They found their quarters without trouble. The rooms were simple but comfortable, designed to accommodate different body types. Jake set down his bag and activated the room's communication system. "This is Commander Morrison checking in with Earth Command," he said. A few seconds later, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Morrison, this is Control. How's your first day among the aliens?" "Interesting so far. The station is impressive, and most species seem welcoming. We'll attend the opening ceremony tonight and start formal meetings tomorrow." "Good luck, Commander. Remember, you're representing all of humanity out there." Jake ended the transmission and sat on the bed. The weight of responsibility felt heavy on his shoulders. Everything he did here would shape how other species saw humans for generations to come. A few hours later, they dressed in their formal uniforms and headed to the opening ceremony. The main hall was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Hundreds of beings filled the space, representing species from across the galaxy. Jake and his team found seats near the middle of the hall. Around them, creatures of all types talked and gestured. Some used sounds, others seemed to communicate through color changes in their skin. and a few appeared to use hand signals. "The one near the front," Lisa said quietly. "That's Ambassador Thecklor from the Galactic Council. He's supposed to be over 300 years old." Jake looked at the creature she indicated. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and what looked like gills on the sides of its neck. Its eyes were wise and ancient. The ceremony began with speeches from various ambassadors. Each spoke about trade, peace, and cooperation among the stars. Jake listened carefully, trying to understand the complex politics of galactic society. But he could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Throughout the ceremony, he felt like he was being watched. Not the casual curiosity he had experienced earlier, but something more focused, more dangerous. During a break between speeches, Jake excused himself and walked to the edge of the hall. He pretended to study one of the decorative displays while scanning the crowd with his peripheral vision. There, in the shadows near the upper balcony, a large shape that seemed to be focused entirely on him and his team. Jake could not make out details in the dim light, but whatever it was big, and it was definitely watching them. "Jake?" Lisa's voice came from behind him. "Is everything okay?" "Fine," he replied, turning back to rejoin them. "Just getting a feel for the place." But as they walked back to their seats, Jake made a mental note to be extra careful. His military training told him that somewhere in this crowd of peaceful traders and diplomats there was a predator, and for some reason, it had chosen humans as its target. The ceremony continued for another hour, but Jake's attention was divided between the speeches and watching for movement in the shadows. Whatever was up there had not moved, but he could still feel its eyes on him. When the ceremony finally ended, beings began to disperse to various reception areas throughout the station. Jake led his team toward the diplomatic quarter, where Earth had been assigned space for informal meetings. "Commander," Sam said quietly as they walked, "I've got that feeling again, like we're being hunted." Jake nodded grimly. "I know. Stay alert, but don't make it obvious. Whatever's watching us, I don't think it's ready to make a move yet." As they entered the diplomatic section, Jake caught one last glimpse of a massive shadow moving along the upper levels. Whatever it was following them. The hunt had begun, even if they did not know it yet. The diplomatic reception was in full swing when the predator made its move. Jake stood near a tall window that looked out into space, talking with Ambassador Krell about mining rights in the outer systems. The ambassador was a short, round creature with copper-colored skin and 3 eyes that blinked in sequence. "Your species shows promise," Krell was saying, "but you must understand the galaxy has rules, old rules established by those who came before." Dr. Lisa Park stood nearby, deep in conversation with a group of scientists from different worlds. She was explaining human biology to creatures who found it fascinating that humans needed to breathe oxygen and drink water to survive. Lieutenant Sam Carter remained close to the wall, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Even without his weapon, his military training kept him alert for danger. He noticed things others missed, the way certain groups avoided each other, the subtle body language that suggested old conflicts, the careful positioning that marked predator and prey species. The Great Hall was filled with the sounds of conversation, translation devices, and the gentle music that played from hidden speakers. Hundreds of beings moved about, creating a colorful tapestry of galactic civilization. Then everything changed. A deep, rumbling roar echoed through the hall, cutting through all other sounds like a knife. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The gentle music seemed to die away into nothing. From the shadows near the upper balcony, a massive figure stepped into the light. It stood 8 feet tall with broad shoulders and long arms that ended in clawed hands. Its skin was dark gray and looked like natural armor plating. Red eyes scanned the crowd below with the focused intensity of a born killer. "Kethvar," Ambassador Krell whispered, his 3 eyes wide with fear. "A hunter from the Rim worlds." The creature descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate and measured. The crowd parted before it like water, beings scrambling to get out of its path. Some of the smaller species actually fled the hall entirely, their instincts telling them that death had entered their peaceful gathering. Jake remained where he was, though he felt Lisa and Sam move closer to him. He studied the alien predator with the calm assessment of a professional soldier. The creature was built for killing, that much was obvious. But Jake had faced killers before. The HFY reached the center of the hall and stopped. It raised its right arm, and with a metallic sound that rang through the silence, a blade extended from its forearm. The weapon was nearly 2 feet long, curved like a talon, and looked like it had been forged from bone. "I am Zexthar of the HFY," the creature announced in a voice like grinding stone. "I have come to hunt the most dangerous prey in the galaxy." His red eyes swept across the terrified crowd until they found what they were looking for. The alien's gaze locked onto Jake Morrison, and a smile that showed far too many teeth spread across its face. "Human," Zexthar said, pointing his blade directly at Jake. "I challenge you to the hunt of honor. Face me in single combat, or be marked as a coward before all these witnesses." The hall fell into complete silence. Even the station's background noise seemed to quiet. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward him, watching to see how this new species would respond to a formal challenge from one of the galaxy's most feared predators. Instead of fear or anger, Jake felt something unexpected. He smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a forced expression of bravery. It was the genuine, relaxed smile of someone who had just been presented with an interesting puzzle. Jake looked at the 8-foot-tall killing machine pointing a bone blade at him, and found the situation almost amusing. This reaction clearly confused Zexthar. In all his hunts across the galaxy, prey species had responded with terror, desperate aggression, or attempts to flee. Never had any creature looked at him with such casual confidence. The HFY warrior's certainty wavered for the first time in his hunting career. "Jake," Lisa whispered urgently, "we need to call for help. Contact the station security." "Commander," Sam added quietly, "this thing is built to kill. We should get you out of here." But Jake held up a hand to stop them. He stepped forward, his smile never wavering until he stood just 20 feet from the alien predator. The difference in size was striking. Zexthar towered over the human like a giant over a child. "I take it you're here for me?" Jake asked in a conversational tone that made the alien's mandibles click with confusion. "You do not run," Zexthar observed, his head tilting slightly. "You do not show fear." "This is unexpected. Should I be afraid?" Jake asked with genuine curiosity. "I mean, you're certainly impressive looking, but I've seen scary things before." A murmur ran through the watching crowd. Some species whispered in their own languages about the human's apparent madness. Others seemed intrigued by this unexpected development. Zexthar straightened to his full height, trying to reassert his dominance. "I am a HFY warrior. My people have hunted the most dangerous creatures across 1,000 worlds. Your species is new to the galaxy, untested. You will provide sport before you die." "Untested," Jake repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting. Tell me, how many humans have your people actually hunted?" The question caught Zexthar off guard. "None," he admitted. "But we have heard stories. Your kind spreads across worlds like a plague. You fight among yourselves constantly. You destroy your own environment. Clearly you are savage and dangerous." "Well, you're not wrong about the dangerous part," Jake said with a chuckle, "though I think your information might be a little incomplete." Ambassador Krell had recovered from his initial shock and was now speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling for station security. Other diplomatic staff were doing the same. But Jake knew that by the time help arrived, this confrontation would be over one way or another. "According to the laws of the Galactic Council," Zexthar announced formally, "I issue challenge to single combat. You may choose weapons and location. If you defeat me, your species gains honor. If you refuse, you are marked as cowards. If I defeat you, I claim trophy rights." Jake considered this for a moment. Around him, the crowd waited in tense silence. He could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. How humanity was perceived in the galaxy would depend largely on what happened in the next few minutes. "Sure," Jake said finally. "Why not? But let's make this interesting." This response sent another wave of surprised murmurs through the crowd. Zexthar's red eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Interesting how?" the HFY asked. "Well, if we're going to do this properly, we should do it right," Jake explained. "Your people value the hunt, correct? The challenge of tracking and defeating dangerous prey." "This is true," Zexthar agreed cautiously. "Then let's have a real hunt," Jake proposed. "Not just a simple fight to the death, something that will truly test both our skills." Jake turned to address the crowd as much as his challenger. I propose we use the station's abandoned industrial sector. It's a maze of maintenance tunnels, cargo bays, and old machinery. Perfect hunting ground. He looked back at Zexthar. Blade weapons only. No ranged weapons, no armor. The hunt lasts 12 hours. If you can kill or capture me in that time, you win. If I survive or manage to tag you with a non-lethal strike, humanity wins. The alien's eyes gleamed with interest despite his confusion. This was indeed more like a proper hunt than a simple duel. And if you lose? If I lose, you get your trophy, Jake said simply. But if I win, you leave the station and tell other Kethvar that humans aren't as easy to hunt as they thought. Zexthar was quiet for a long moment, considering the proposal. Finally, he retracted his blade and nodded. Agreed. The hunt begins at the next station cycle. As the alien turned and walked away, the crowd began to buzz with excited conversation. Species that had seemed terrified moments before were now placing bets on the outcome. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. Are you insane? That thing is a professional killer. So am I, Jake replied, his smile never fading. The difference is he's used to hunting prey. I'm used to hunting predators. Sam looked skeptical. Commander, with respect, that thing has been hunting dangerous creatures across the galaxy. What makes you think you can beat it? Jake's smile widened slightly. Because he made the same mistake that every predator makes when they first encounter humans. He assumes we're prey. As they left the reception hall, Jake could feel Zexthar's eyes following him. The hunt would begin soon, but Jake was already several moves ahead. The alien warrior had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. Jake Morrison stood in the equipment room, methodically checking each piece of gear that Dr. Lisa Park had gathered for him. The hunt would begin in 2 hours, and every detail mattered now. The abandoned industrial sector of Nexus Prime stretched out before him like a three-dimensional maze of opportunity. Basic medical kit, Lisa said, handing him a small pouch. Bandages, pain suppressors, infection fighters. Nothing fancy, but it might keep you alive if you get hurt. Jake clipped the kit to his belt. What about the layout of the sector? Lieutenant Sam Carter spread a digital map across the table. I managed to get the engineering schematics from station maintenance. The industrial sector was abandoned about 10 years ago when they built the new manufacturing level. It's a maze down there. Cargo bays, maintenance tunnels, processing plants, old assembly lines. Jake studied the map carefully, memorizing the layout. The sector was huge, covering nearly a quarter of the station's lower levels. Perfect for what he had in mind. The power systems are mostly offline, Sam continued. Emergency lighting only. Some of the machinery might still work, but most of it's been shut down for safety reasons. Environmental controls? Jake asked. Basic life support, but the temperature regulation is spotty. Some areas will be hot, others cold. Air circulation is minimal. Jake nodded. These details would matter. Zexthar was adapted for hunting, but he was used to natural environments. The artificial maze of the industrial sector would be alien to him in ways he probably had not considered. Jake, Lisa said quietly. Are you sure about this? That creature has been hunting dangerous prey his entire life. You're a soldier. Yes, but this is different. Jake looked up from the map and smiled that same calm smile that had confused Zexthar earlier. Lisa, let me tell you something about humans that most aliens don't understand yet. We weren't always the dominant species on Earth. He pointed to a section of the map showing interconnected maintenance tunnels. For millions of years we were prey. We were weaker than the big cats, slower than the wolves, less armored than the rhinos. But we survived. How? Sam asked, genuinely curious. We learned to hunt the hunters, Jake explained. Our ancestors figured out that you don't beat a predator by being stronger or faster. You beat it by being smarter, by changing the rules of the game. Jake pulled up historical files on his tablet, showing images of early human hunting techniques. We became persistence hunters. We would track wounded animals for days, weeks even. We never gave up. We used tools, traps, teamwork. We turned the environment into a weapon. Lisa looked at the images with new understanding. You're not just planning to survive the hunt. You're planning to hunt him. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Zexthar is thinking like an apex predator. He expects me to run, hide, maybe try to fight back when cornered. He's not expecting me to turn this into a different kind of game entirely. The hours passed quickly as Jake prepared. He studied every detail of the industrial sector layout, identifying potential bottlenecks, hiding spots, and areas where he could set up traps. He reviewed what he knew about Kethvar physiology from the diplomatic briefings. Enhanced senses, he muttered, reading from his notes. Thermal vision, acute hearing, excellent sense of smell. Natural armor plating, razor-sharp claws, built for close combat. Sounds like you're at a disadvantage, Sam observed. Only if I play his game, Jake replied, but I'm not going to. As the time approached, word of the hunt had spread throughout Nexus Prime. The main observation deck was packed with beings from dozens of species, all eager to witness this unusual contest. Betting pools had been established, with odds heavily favoring the Kethvar warrior. Jake made his way to the entrance of the industrial sector, carrying only a basic knife and the medical kit Lisa had prepared. According to the rules they had agreed upon, both fighters would enter from opposite ends of the sector and hunt each other with blade weapons only. Zexthar was already waiting when Jake arrived. The alien warrior had painted his armor with traditional hunting symbols and carried a ceremonial bone blade that gleamed in the station's lights. He looked confident, perhaps even eager. "Human," Zexthar said formally. "Do you wish to reconsider? There is no shame in acknowledging a superior predator." "Thanks for the offer," Jake replied cheerfully. "But I'm looking forward to this. It's been a while since I had a good challenge." This response made Zexathar's mandibles click again with that same confusion. The alien clearly could not understand why his prey seemed so relaxed. Ambassador Krell stepped forward to officiate the beginning of the hunt. His 3 eyes blinked nervously as he read from an official document. According to Galactic Council regulations governing formal challenges, the hunt will last 12 standard hours. Victory conditions are death, surrender, or incapacitation of one participant, or successful non-lethal tagging by the human participant. Weapons are restricted to bladed instruments only. Environmental hazards are considered part of the challenge. He looked at both participants. "Do you both understand and accept these terms?" "Understood," Zexthar said formally. "Crystal clear," Jake replied with a grin. "Then let the hunt begin," Krell announced. Jake entered the industrial sector through a maintenance hatch, immediately disappearing into the maze of corridors and chambers. Behind him he could hear Zexathar entering from the other side of the sector, his claws clicking against the metal flooring. The first thing Jake did was not what Zexathar expected. Instead of looking for a place to hide or setting up a defensive position, Jake began to explore the sector systematically. He moved quickly but quietly, mapping the actual layout against the schematics he had memorized. As he moved, Jake began to modify his environment. He loosened support cables here, adjusted valve settings there, and moved pieces of equipment to create new pathways and obstacles. He was not just hiding in the maze, he was redesigning it. Testing, Jake said softly into his communicator, which was tuned to the station's general frequency. He knew Zexathar would be listening. "You know," Jake continued conversationally as he worked, "I was reading about Kethvar hunting traditions earlier. Fascinating stuff. Your people are incredible predators, apex hunters who have conquered worlds." Jake paused to reroute a steam vent, sending hot vapor into a corridor he planned to use later. "But I noticed something interesting in the records. Most of your traditional prey are natural creatures, animals with instincts but not intelligence, creatures that fight or flee based on fear." He moved on to the next modification, his voice carrying through the comm system to wherever Zexthar was listening. "The thing is, humans learned to hunt creatures just like your people. We were never the strongest or fastest, so we had to get creative." Jake found a storage room filled with old maintenance equipment and began selecting useful items. Not weapons exactly, but tools that could become weapons in the right circumstances. "We learned that the key to hunting predators is patience," Jake continued. "You don't rush at them. You don't give them the fight they're expecting. You make them come to you on your terms when you're ready." Somewhere in the maze, Zexthar was tracking him through thermal sensors and scent trails. The alien was probably getting frustrated that his prey was talking instead of running. Good. Frustrated predators made mistakes. Jake set up his first trap in a narrow corridor between 2 cargo bays. It was simple but effective, a carefully positioned piece of machinery that would create a bottleneck, forcing anyone passing through to move in a predictable pattern. "The funny thing about being human," Jake said as he worked, "is that other species always underestimate us. They see our soft skin, our lack of natural weapons, our relatively small size, and they think we're weak." He moved on to the next location, continuing his psychological campaign against his hunter. But they don't understand that we didn't survive by being strong. We survived by being relentless, by never giving up, by turning every disadvantage into an advantage. Jake could hear movement in the distance now, the sound of claws on metal getting closer. Zexithar was tracking him, following the scent trail Jake was deliberately leaving. But the alien had no idea he was walking into a carefully constructed trap. "See you soon," Jake said cheerfully into the comm, then switched it off and melted into the shadows. Zexithar moved through the industrial sector with the confidence of a born killer. His thermal vision picked up the heat signature of his prey moving through the lower corridors, and his enhanced hearing caught every footstep, every breath. This would be over quickly, he thought. Humans were clearly not as dangerous as the rumors suggested. The alien warrior dropped from an upper platform into a maintenance corridor, his claws finding easy purchase on the metal grating. His thermal sensors showed that the human had passed through this area recently. The floor still glowed faintly with residual body heat. What Zexithar did not realize was that Jake had spent the last 2 hours turning the industrial sector into a weapon. Every corridor had been carefully modified, every junction planned, every piece of equipment repositioned for maximum advantage. The human was not running randomly through a maze. He was leading his hunter. Through a carefully orchestrated trap, the first sign that something was wrong came when Zexithar rounded a corner and found himself face to face with a wall of steam. The human had rerouted a thermal vent, filling the corridor with hot vapor that confused his thermal vision and masked any scent trails. Clever, Zexithar admitted to himself, but not overly concerned. He would simply have to rely more on his hearing and less on his thermal sensors. He pushed through the steam and continued hunting. But as he moved deeper into the sector, more problems began to appear. Corridors that should have connected according to his mental map ended in dead ends blocked by carefully positioned equipment. Sounds echoed strangely, making it difficult to pinpoint their source. And always just ahead of him, the human's voice continued its casual commentary. "You know what I find interesting about predator psychology?" Jake's voice came through the comm system, seeming to echo from everywhere at once. "It's all about confidence. A predator succeeds because it believes it's the most dangerous thing in its environment." Zexithar paused at a junction, trying to determine which direction the voice was coming from. His thermal vision showed heat sources in multiple directions, but he could not tell which ones were real and which might be reflections or false signatures. "But what happens when that confidence starts to crack?" Jake continued. "When the predator realizes that maybe, just maybe, it's not the hunter anymore." The alien chose the left corridor and moved forward, his blade extended and ready. The passage was narrow, forcing him to move single file through a space barely wide enough for his broad shoulders. Perfect hunting terrain for him. His prey would have nowhere to run if cornered here. The attack came from above. Jake dropped from a concealed position in the ceiling, landing behind Zexithar in the narrow corridor. But instead of trying to engage the alien in direct combat, the human did something unexpected. He triggered a mechanism he had prepared earlier. A section of heavy machinery swung down from the ceiling like a massive pendulum, missing Zexithar by inches, but blocking the corridor behind him. At the same time, a support strut gave way ahead of him, dropping another barrier into place. The alien warrior found himself trapped in a 10-foot section of corridor. "Surprise," Jake said pleasantly from somewhere above him. Zexithar roared in frustration and began tearing at the barriers with his claws. The metal was thick but not impossible to cut through. It would just take time. Time that would allow his prey to escape and set up more traps. By the time the alien had cut his way free, Jake was long gone. But he had left behind something unexpected. A small medical device that had been recording Zexithar's vital signs. Heart rate elevated, stress hormones increasing, breathing patterns showing frustration and anger. The hunter was beginning to understand that he was not hunting prey. He was facing an opponent. For the next several hours, the pattern repeated and escalated. Jake would appear just long enough to trigger another trap or obstacle, then vanish again into the maze he had created. Zexithar found himself constantly reacting instead of hunting, always one step behind his elusive target. "Did I ever tell you about persistence hunting?" Jake's voice came through the comm again as Zexithar struggled through another section of rerouted corridors. It's how my ancestors hunted mammoths and other creatures much larger and stronger than they were. Zexthar was beginning to feel something he had never experienced in all his years of hunting. Exhaustion. Not just physical tiredness, but mental fatigue from constantly having to solve problems instead of simply overpowering his prey. The idea is simple, Jake continued. You don't try to kill the mammoth quickly. You wound it, then you follow it. Day after day, never letting it rest, never letting it recover. Eventually the mammoth collapses from exhaustion and blood loss. The alien warrior paused, suddenly understanding the true nature of his situation. He was not the mammoth in this analogy. He was being hunted. The beautiful thing about persistence hunting, Jake's voice went on, is that it works even better on predators than it does on prey animals. Predators are used to quick kills, decisive victories. They're not psychologically prepared for long, drawn-out contests where the advantage slowly shifts to their opponent. Zexthar's claws scraped against the metal flooring as he clenched his fists. His thermal vision was largely useless now, confused by the heat sources Jake had strategically placed throughout the sector. His hearing was constantly overwhelmed by the sounds of machinery starting and stopping at random intervals. Even his sense of smell was compromised by chemical scents the human had released into the air circulation system. 7 hours down, 5 to go, Jake announced cheerfully. How are you holding up in there? The alien realized he had not seen his actual target in over 3 hours. He had been chasing shadows, fighting traps, solving puzzles that led nowhere. Meanwhile, his opponent was somewhere else entirely, probably resting while Zexthar exhausted himself. For the first time in his hunting career, Zexthar felt something approaching panic. This was not how hunts were supposed to go. He was supposed to be the one with the advantage, the one in control. Instead, he felt like a rat in a maze, being manipulated by forces he could not see or understand. You're probably wondering why I keep talking, Jake's voice continued, seemingly reading the alien's thoughts. It's not just to annoy you, though I admit that's a nice bonus. It's because humans are social hunters. We coordinate, we communicate, we work together even when we're alone. Zexthar entered what appeared to be a large cargo bay, hoping to find his opponent finally cornered. Instead, he found another empty room with dozens of heat sources that turned out to be nothing more than warm pieces of metal. Every word I say tells me something about where you are and what you're doing, Jake explained. The echo patterns, the background sounds, the way my voice carries through the station's metal structure. I'm not just talking to you. I'm using you as a living sonar system. The alien's red eyes widened with realization. He had been helping his prey track him this entire time. Every movement he made, every frustrated roar, every scrape of claws on metal was providing information to his opponent. 10 hours, Jake announced, and now his voice seemed to come from a new direction entirely. 2 hours left. Getting tired yet? Zexthar was more than tired. He was beginning to understand that he had made a fundamental error in judgment. He had assumed that because humans were a young species, they were inexperienced. Because they looked soft and vulnerable, they were weak. Because they seemed friendly and peaceful, they were not dangerous. He was starting to realize that humans might be the most dangerous predators he had ever encountered, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they fought in ways that no other species had prepared him for. One more thing, Jake's voice added, closer now than it had been in hours. You made this challenge about hunting the most dangerous prey in the galaxy. You just didn't realize that you had already found it. Somewhere in the maze of metal and machinery, Zexthar heard the sound of approaching footsteps. But for the first time since the hunt began, he was not sure if those footsteps belonged to prey or predator. Zexthar moved through the industrial sector with the confidence of a born killer. His thermal vision picked up the heat signature of his prey moving through the lower corridors, and his enhanced hearing caught every footstep, every breath. This would be over quickly, he thought. Humans were clearly not as dangerous as the rumors suggested. The alien warrior dropped from an upper platform into a maintenance corridor, his claws finding easy purchase on the metal grating. His thermal sensors showed that the human had passed through this area recently. The floor still glowed faintly with residual body heat. What Zexthar did not realize was that Jake had spent the last 2 hours turning the industrial sector into a weapon. Every corridor had been carefully modified, every junction planned, every piece of equipment repositioned for maximum advantage. The human was not running randomly through a maze. He was leading his hunter. Through a carefully orchestrated trap, the first sign that something was wrong came when Zexthar rounded a corner and found himself face to face with a wall of steam. The human had rerouted a thermal vent, filling the corridor with hot vapor that confused his thermal vision and masked any scent trails. Zexthar crouched in the shadows of a massive cargo container, his breathing heavy and labored. 10 hours of constant hunting had taken their toll on the HFY warrior. His natural armor was scratched and dented from forcing his way through Jake's obstacles. His thermal vision flickered inconsistently, overwhelmed by the heat sources the human had scattered throughout the industrial sector. For the first time in his hunting career, Zexthar felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The human should have been dead hours ago. Instead, Jake Morrison had turned the entire sector into a weapon, using every piece of equipment, every corridor, every environmental system against his hunter. 30 minutes left. Jake's voice echoed through the comm system, as calm and cheerful as it had been at the beginning. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation from the reception. You said humans were untested, that we spread like a plague and destroy our environment. Zexthar's head snapped up, tracking the direction of the voice. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, bouncing off the metal walls in ways that made pinpointing the source impossible. You weren't wrong, Jake continued. We do spread across worlds pretty quickly, and we do have a tendency to change our environment to suit our needs. But you missed the important part. The alien warrior rose to his full height, gripping his bone blade tightly. Somewhere in this maze, his prey was still moving, still talking, still avoiding the death that should have claimed him hours ago. The important part is that we're really, really good at it, Jake said. Adapting, surviving, turning hostile environments into homes. It's what we do. Zexthar moved toward what he thought might be the source of the voice, his claws clicking against the metal flooring. But as he rounded a corner, he found himself in another empty corridor. The human's heat signature was nowhere to be seen. 20 minutes, Jake announced, and this time his voice definitely came from behind the alien. Zexthar spun around, but again found nothing. His frustration boiled over into a roar that echoed through the entire sector. He had been hunting for over 10 hours and had not even caught a glimpse of his actual target. Getting frustrated? Jake asked, and there was something different in his tone now. Less conversational, more focused. That's understandable. Predators aren't used to long hunts. You're built for quick kills, decisive victories. The alien forced himself to think calmly. His prey was trying to manipulate his emotions, make him careless. But Zexthar was still a trained warrior. He could still win this if he played it smart. But humans, Jake continued, we evolved for marathon hunts. We can track wounded prey for days without stopping. We never give up, never stop coming. It's probably our most dangerous trait. Zexthar made a decision. Instead of chasing the voice, he would force his opponent to come to him. He moved toward the central cargo bay, the largest open space in the sector. If Jake wanted to win, he would have to confront him eventually. The cargo bay was enormous, filled with massive containers and loading equipment. Dim emergency lights cast long shadows across the space. Zexthar positioned himself in the center where he could see all approaches. 10 minutes, Jake's voice said. Much closer now. Human, Zexthar called out, his voice echoing through the bay. I know you are here. Face me with honor or hide like a coward until time runs out. Oh, I'm here, Jake replied, and his voice came from directly behind Zexthar. The alien spun around, blade raised, expecting to finally face his elusive prey, but the space behind him was empty. However, something was different. A subtle sound, a shift in the shadows, a feeling that he was no longer alone. Actually, Jake said, and this time the voice came from above. I've been here for quite a while. Zexthar looked up and saw something that made his blood run cold. The ceiling of the cargo bay was crisscrossed with support cables and maintenance platforms. Hanging from these cables was an intricate network of cargo containers, equipment, and metal beams that had been carefully positioned and rigged. You see, Jake explained, still invisible in the shadows above, while you were chasing me through the corridors, I was preparing this room. Every cable, every support beam, every piece of equipment has been carefully positioned and weakened. Zexthar began to back toward the exit, but it was too late. Behind him, a section of flooring gave way, revealing that Jake had also undermined the structural supports below. The alien found himself standing on a small island of solid ground in the center of a carefully constructed trap. 5 minutes left, Jake announced. But I don't think we'll need them. A figure dropped from the shadows above, landing lightly on a container about 20 feet away. It was Jake Morrison, looking completely unharmed and somehow refreshed despite the 10-hour hunt. He held a simple metal blade in his hand, nothing fancy or elaborate like Zexthar's ceremonial weapon. Finally, Zexthar snarled, raising his bone blade. "Face me properly, human." "Sure," Jake said with that same calm smile. "But first let me ask you something. Why did you think this would be easy?" The question caught Zexthar off guard. "You are prey, small, weak, defenseless." "Defenseless," Jake repeated thoughtfully. "That's interesting. Tell me, in all your studies of human history, did you ever read about our wars?" Zexthar hesitated. He had read some reports but had dismissed them as exaggerations. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years," Jake continued, moving casually along the edge of a container, "not hunting animals or prey species, but fighting other humans. Other predators just as smart and dangerous as ourselves." The alien realized that Jake was not just talking to pass time. He was positioning himself, moving through the three-dimensional maze of the rigged cargo bay with practiced ease. Every human soldier learns to fight opponents who are just as intelligent, just as well-armed, and just as determined to survive, Jake explained. "We don't hunt prey. We hunt each other." Zexthar leaped toward the container where Jake stood, his blade extended for a killing strike. But the human was already gone, having swung to another position using one of the carefully positioned cables. 3 minutes, Jake called out. "But like I said, I don't think we'll need them." The alien landed heavily on the container, which immediately began to tilt under his weight. Jake had weakened its supports just enough that it would hold briefly, then collapse. Zexthar found himself sliding toward the edge as the container tipped toward the floor. He leaped again, trying to reach solid ground, but found himself caught in the web of cables and debris that Jake had arranged. Every surface he tried to land on shifted or collapsed. Every handhold he grasped came loose in his claws. "The thing about humans," Jake said, now standing calmly on a platform that Zexthar could not reach, "is that we don't just adapt to our environment. We change our environment to suit our needs." The alien made one final desperate leap toward his opponent, putting all his remaining strength into a last attack. But as he flew through the air, Jake simply smiled and triggered the mechanism he had been preparing for hours. The entire ceiling of the cargo bay collapsed in a controlled avalanche of cables, containers, and metal beams. But instead of crushing both of them, the debris fell in a carefully orchestrated pattern that created a cage around Zexthar without seriously injuring him. When the dust settled, the HFY warrior found himself pinned under a lattice of metal supports, unable to move but unharmed. Jake dropped down from his platform and walked over to where the alien lay trapped. "Time," Jake announced, touching the edge of his blade gently to Zexthar's throat in the ritual gesture that marked a successful hunt. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Zexthar stared up at the human who had just defeated him using methods he had never imagined possible. Jake looked down at the alien warrior with something that might have been respect. "Why do you smile?" Zexthar asked finally. "You have defeated me, claimed victory. Why do you not show triumph or dominance?" Jake sat down on a piece of debris next to the trapped alien. "Because I wasn't smiling about beating you. I was smiling because I recognized you. Recognized me. You're a hunter," Jake explained. "A real predator, evolved and trained to be one of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. When you challenged me, I smiled because I knew I was finally going to face a worthy opponent." Jake began carefully removing the debris that pinned Zexthar, being careful not to cause injury. "See, the thing that makes humans dangerous isn't that we're stronger or faster than other species. It's that we're the only species that learned to hunt predators." As the alien was freed, Jake offered him water from his medical kit. Zexthar accepted it, still trying to understand what had happened. "For millions of years we were prey," Jake continued. "But we survived because we learned that the best way to deal with a predator isn't to run from it or fight it on its terms. The best way is to change the nature of the game entirely." Zexthar drank the water slowly, his red eyes studying the human with new understanding. "You turned the hunt into something else entirely." "I turned it into what humans do best," Jake corrected. "Problem-solving, environmental manipulation, psychological warfare, and persistence hunting. You challenged me to be prey, but I chose to be human instead." The alien warrior struggled to his feet, helped by Jake's steadying hand. For the first time since entering the industrial sector,